The great hall of the Interstellar Concord hummed with tension as delegates from dozens of species filed into the cavernous chamber. Holographic banners representing member worlds rippled in simulated breezes, casting shifting patterns of light across the polished obsidian floor. It was the morning session of the biannual summit, and already the air felt thick with unspoken dread. High Envoy Cora of the Serenth stood nervously at the edge of the assembly, her slender fingers trembling as they scrolled through a data slate filled with grim reports. Her bioluminescent skin, normally a calming azure, had dimmed to a troubled indigo. Beside her, Council Moderator Vale, an owl-like Grecian elder, whose stern demeanor had mediated 100 such gatherings, ushered latecomers to their seats with impatient gestures. "We'll begin in 3 minutes," Vale announced, his voice resonating through the chamber. "The Serenth delegation has requested emergency speaking priority." From across the room, Councillor Marisol Vega of the United Earth Consortium watched Cora with quiet concern. Vega, a woman in her early 40s with close-cropped hair and eyes that missed nothing, wore the simple gray jumpsuit that had become Earth's diplomatic uniform. The consortium seal, a stylized globe wrapped in olive branches, glinted on her collar as she leaned forward to whisper to her aide. "What do we know about the Serenth situation?" she asked. The aide, a fresh-faced lieutenant, shook his head. "Only rumors, ma'am. Their agrarian moons have gone silent over the past week. Hyperspace comms picked up distress signals, then nothing." Vega nodded, her gaze returning to Cora. The Serenth Confederacy had been peaceful cultivators for centuries, their biotech crops feeding half a dozen minor species across 3 sectors. They weren't warriors. They were farmers and botanists who had perfected the art of growing food in the harshest environments. If they were in trouble, it spoke of a significant threat. "And the Thraxel?" Vega pressed. "Still rumors, ma'am. Intelligence suggests their fleet has been mobilizing, but we have no confirmed sightings beyond the accounts of survivors. The Concord's military forces are already stretched thin with the piracy outbreaks in the Carillon sector." The chamber's ambient hum dropped suddenly as Moderator Vale ascended to the central podium. "This emergency session will now commence. High Envoy Cora of the Serenth Confederacy has the floor." As Cora moved to take her place, the chamber fell utterly silent. On her podium, a hollow projector flickered to life, and the air above it shimmered with ghostly images, charred fields, broken domes, and Serenth civilians bound in chains. Many delegates gasped, others turned away. 3 standard days ago," Cora began, her voice trembling but determined, "the Thraxel Imperium launched a full-scale invasion of the Yareth system, our primary agricultural center, and home to 12 million Serenth citizens." She activated another hologram. The image that formed showed massive dread cruisers, sleek obsidian hulls bristling with spike lances, descending on delicate biodomes. The Serenth's biotech shields collapsed within minutes. Entire orbiting biodiversity farms were incinerated by searing beams that the caption identified as plasma scourges. "Our defense forces were overwhelmed in hours," Cora continued. "The Thraxel fleet consists of at least 120 warships, with ground forces estimated at 15,000 shock troops. They've delivered a single demand: immediate subjugation or total eradication of Serenth culture. Their ultimatum was explicit: become our hives or face xenocide." Murmurs swelled throughout the chamber, rising into a cacophony of disbelief and outrage. Moderator Vale raised his hands for quiet. "High Envoy, what specific assistance does the Serenth Confederacy request from the Concord?" he asked, his tone formal, but eyes sympathetic. "We need immediate military intervention," Cora replied. "The Thraxel have established orbital superiority and are systematically destroying our food production facilities. They're executing our scientists and enslaving our population. Without intervention, the Serenth face extinction within weeks." The chamber erupted again, delegates turning to one another in urgent consultation. The Aloxi representative, a tall figure swathed in iridescent robes, was the first to respond. The Aloxi Federation offers evacuation transports and medical aid. We can dispatch ships within 2 days to extract refugees. The Alani counselor, her feathered crest rising with emotion, added, "The Alani Collective will provide sanctuary on our outer colonies for displaced Serenth." These offers, while generous, addressed only the symptoms, not the invasion itself. Councillor Jorik of the Grecians proposed isolated strike teams to disrupt Thraxel supply lines, but admitted their military was already committed to anti-piracy operations in 3 sectors. As each delegate spoke, the terrible truth became clear. No single species had the surplus military might to challenge the Thraxel's battle armada. The offers amounted to evacuation and relief, acceptance that Yareth was already lost. Despair settled over the chamber. This was not a diplomatic crisis that could be resolved with negotiations. It was an extinction event unfolding in real time. A hush fell when Councillor Vega stood. Earth was a relative newcomer to the conquered, having joined only 60 years earlier. Human fleets numbered but a handful of aging cruisers, still relying on kinetic artillery instead of the energy lances that most advanced species had adopted. Their expertise in interstellar warfare remained largely untested beyond Sol Alliance defense. The United Earth Consortium will provide military assistance, Vega stated simply. Skeptical murmurs rippled through the assembly. A Grecian delegate scoffed audibly. With what? Your primitive railguns and chemical propellants? Vega's calm eyes swept the chamber, silencing the whispers. With people willing to fight, she replied. While we may lack the advanced energy weapons of the Thraxel, humanity has something they may not expect: experience in asymmetric warfare. We've spent more of our history fighting than most species represented here. She turned to Cora, whose bioluminescence had brightened slightly with fragile hope. High Envoy, the Earth Task Force isn't large, but it's commanded by veterans who understand how to engage superior forces. If your people can provide intelligence on Thraxel tactics and vulnerabilities, we'll deploy within 10 days. Cora's skin pulsed with gratitude. We'll share everything we know. As the council session concluded, Vega approached Cora privately. I must be honest with you, she said quietly. Our intervention comes with significant risk. If we arrive and fail, we become just another tragedy in the night. Cora's luminescence dimmed with understanding. And if you succeed? Vega's expression remained unchanged, but her eyes hardened with resolve. Then we become legends. War Room 34, within the United Defense Coalition headquarters, was a stark contrast to the ornate Concord Chamber. Buried deep beneath the Eurasian continent, its walls were lined with tactical displays and communication arrays. The air held the sharp scent of recycled oxygen and strong coffee. General Naomi Blake stood before a holographic simulation of Thraxel dreadcruisers. Her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun. At 62, she had spent more of her life at war than at peace, and her face bore the lines to prove it. Their armor plating is impressive, she remarked, zooming in on the simulation. Preliminary analysis suggests even our heaviest tungsten penetrators will struggle to breach it at range. Admiral Thomas Schatz, commander of the modest Earth Task Force, nodded grimly. At his fingertips, data scrolled listing their available assets: 12 frigates armed primarily with railguns, 6 corvettes equipped with missile pods, and 2 transport carriers. A force that would be considered modest even for planetary defense, let alone interstellar intervention. And their offensive capabilities, he asked. Plasma batteries capable of vaporizing composite hull cruisers, Blake replied. If they get a clean shot, our ships won't survive a direct hit. Colonel Elena Vasquez, liaison to the 14th Mechanized Regiment and the 3rd Aeromech Brigade, studied the ground force projections. We're looking at committing 8,000 soldiers from the 14th and 5,000 from the 3rd Aeromech, outnumbered almost 2-to-1 by Thraxel ground forces, according to Sarenth intelligence. Blake manipulated the hologram, highlighting the formation patterns of the Thraxel fleet. Their ships are individually potent, but rely on rigid line formations. More importantly, our intercepts show minimal electronic countermeasures. They fight each ship as a lone warrior, with little coordination between vessels. She stepped back, a glint of calculation in her eyes. If we can force them into a networked engagement, coordinate our attacks across multiple vectors, we may fracture their doctrine. Schatz looked unconvinced. That's a thin strategic edge against overwhelming firepower. It's all we have, Blake replied. Their technological superiority is unquestionable, but their tactical approach appears predictable, almost ritualistic. They rely on individual ship prowess rather than fleet synergy. Vega, who had been silently observing from the doorway, stepped forward. The council's approved the mission. We depart in 10 days. She surveyed the grim faces around her. I won't sugarcoat this. The odds are unfavorable. Unfavorable, Schatz repeated with a mirthless chuckle. That's diplomatic language for suicide mission. Blake's expression remained unchanged. We've faced worse odds. The Battle of Proxima Centauri, the Lunar Rebellion. Both times we were outgunned and outmanned. And both times we had home field advantage, Vasquez countered. This is different. We're fighting in unknown territory, against an enemy with superior firepower. To protect aliens most of our citizens couldn't identify on a star chart. Vega's eyes flashed. Those aliens grow 40% of the biotech medical compounds that keep our colony worlds functional. They're peaceful farmers being slaughtered. This isn't just altruism. It's protecting our own interests while doing what's right. A tense silence followed, broken, when Blake finally nodded. 10 days to prepare, Admiral. I want every ship retrofitted with the latest ECW packages. Colonel, your ground forces will need crash courses in Sarenth terrain and biology. As the meeting dispersed, Vega caught Blake by the arm. If we fail, then we become just another crash in the night, Blake finished, echoing Vega's earlier words to Cora. She allowed herself a thin smile. But if we succeed, we become legends, Vega completed. Blake's expression hardened with resolve. Then let's be the thunder they never heard coming. On Yareth's outer moon, Tekran, surviving Sarenth scientists, worked feverishly in makeshift laboratories. The moon's natural caverns provided both shelter and concealment from Thraxel patrols. Cora moved among them, her diminished bioluminescence reflecting the collective trauma they had endured. Dr. Lyran, chief botanist of the now-destroyed Central Biodome, carefully manipulated what appeared to be golden-green tendrils in a nutrient bath. The vine spears are adapting to the synthetic compounds we've introduced, she explained to Colonel Vasquez, who had arrived with an advanced team of human specialists. They should be capable of penetrating Thraxel hull materials. Vasquez studied the writhing plant-like structures with professional interest. How do they work? They're bioengineered parasites, Lyran explained. Once attached to a surface, they burrow inward, secreting acids that dissolve metal alloys. When they reach electrical systems, they release conductive spores that trigger short circuits. You've weaponized your agricultural technology, Vasquez observed. Lyran's skin darkened with emotion. We never intended them for warfare. These were designed to break down derelict stations for recycling. Her voice cracked. My family was in the Eastern Dome when it fell. My bondmate. Our children. Vasquez reached out awkwardly, then let her hand fall, uncertain of the appropriate gesture of comfort for a Sarenth. I'm sorry, she said simply. Today, we fight with their memory, Lyran replied, her voice strengthening. And for those who remain, in the refugee camps sprawling across Tekran's northern basin, thousands of Sarenth civilians huddled in hastily constructed shelters. As human marines distributed supplies, Whispers spread among the displaced. Earth comes when others falter. An elderly Sarenth farmer approached Captain Jin of the frigate Endeavour, who was overseeing the operation. "Why do you risk yourselves for us?" he asked, his translator struggling with the emotional nuances. "We have no alliance with Earth." Jin considered the question seriously. "Because someday, we might be the ones calling for help," he replied. "And we'd hope someone would answer." 10 days after the council meeting, the Earth Task Force slipped through a standard hyperspace corridor toward the Yareth system. On the bridge of the frigate Endeavour, Captain Marcus Jin briefed his 5 fellow captains via secure holocall. "Our primary advantage is surprise," Jin explained, manipulating a tactical display. "Intelligence suggests the Thraxel believe the Concord lacks both the will and capability to mount a significant response. We'll use that arrogance against them." The captains nodded grimly as Jin outlined the strategy. "Coordinated missile swarm doctrine," he began. "Each frigate will launch simultaneous volleys of 15 missiles toward designated Thraxel targets, with 6 ships firing. That's 90 missiles in the first wave, enough to overwhelm their point defenses through sheer volume." Captain Rivera of the Frontier interjected. "Their point defenses are still technologically superior, which is why we're implementing electronic counter-warfare," Jin continued. "We've modified TerraShield drones to broadcast on Thraxel combands. Once deployed, they'll force the enemy to rely on slower encrypted channels for ship-to-ship communication. Every 10 minutes, the jammers will swap frequencies, keeping their comms constantly degraded." Captain Alvarez of the Valor leaned forward. "And if they adapt?" "That's where hit-and-fade maneuvers come in," Jin replied, highlighting the Yareth asteroid belt. "We'll use these shadows to approach, fire broadsides, then slip behind planetoid Zeta to reload. They'll be fighting ghost ships that strike and vanish before they can bring their superior firepower to bear." The briefing continued for hours, covering contingencies and worst-case scenarios. No one voiced the thought that lingered in every mind. They were betting everything on tactics that existed only in simulation. Meanwhile, on Tech-Ran, Colonel Vasquez's special operations teams worked with Sarenth scientists, integrating the alien biotech with human weaponry. The Vinespear mines had proven their effectiveness in controlled tests, latching onto Thraxel hull material and cooking the core within seconds. "These will be most effective when deployed in clusters," Dr. Lyran explained, as she demonstrated to a group of marine engineers. "The Neurosena darts are more precise, but limited in range." She held up what looked like a translucent thorn. "When this pierces Thraxel armor, it releases compounds that disrupt their neural implants for 15 to 30 seconds. Enough window for your Marines to breach a landed cruiser." Vasquez nodded, mentally cataloging the tactical possibilities. "We'll need to train the sharpshooters in optimal targeting points. These won't penetrate their heavier armor plating." As the preparations accelerated, tension mounted. The Earth Task Force was committed now. There would be no reinforcements, no second chances. Either their strategy would succeed, or they would join the Sarenth in extinction. The night before the operation, General Blake addressed the assembled forces via holocast from Earth. "Tomorrow, we engage an enemy that believes themselves invincible," she stated, her weathered face solemn. "They have superior weapons, superior ships, and superior numbers. But we have something they lack: each other. Our strength lies not in individual heroics, but in coordination, in fighting as a unified force, rather than 20 separate ships or 13,000 separate soldiers." She paused, her gaze seeming to meet each person individually. "The Thraxel expect to face frightened victims. Instead, they will face the combined might of humanity and our Sarenth allies. Remember your training, trust your teammates, and show these predators what happens when they threaten those under our protection." As the Thraxel Armada exited hyperspace in high orbit over Yareth, their lead dread cruiser, the imposingly named Oblivion's Pride, detected unexpected energy signatures near the planet's rings. Fleet Admiral Krev, his exoskeleton gleaming with the insignia of 100 successful conquests, snarled an order. Identify those signatures. Energy patterns match known Terran vessels. His sensor officer reported with evident surprise. 6. No. 8 ships detected. Lord Admiral. Krev's mandibles clicked with amusement. Humans? They've sent humans to challenge us? He signaled to his communications officer. Send battle standard. Obliterate at sight. These primitives will serve as an example to any who consider opposing our conquest. 30 Thraxal warships formed a protective crescent, their plasma batteries charging to full capacity. By doctrine, each captain would select an individual target and engage in honorable combat, ship against ship, until the weaker was destroyed. Aboard the Endeavor, Captain Jin watched the Thraxal formation with cold calculation. Just as intelligence predicted, he remarked to his tactical officer, they're forming a ceremonial battle line. He opened a fleet-wide channel. All ships, execute Phase 1. Launch drones and prepare first missile volley on my mark. Across the small human fleet, launch tubes cycled open. Tiny ECW drones, barely larger than a human hand, silently deployed toward the Thraxal formation. ECW drones away, reported the communications officer. Jamming commencing in 3, 2, 1. Throughout the Thraxal fleet, communication channels suddenly filled with static. Captains who had been receiving clear battlefield updates found themselves isolated, their sophisticated comm systems overwhelmed by Earth's surprisingly effective electronic warfare. Mark, Jin ordered. The Endeavor shuddered as it launched its first volley. 15 missiles in a star pattern spread. Across the formation, 5 other frigates did the same. 70 missiles streaked toward the Thraxal crescent. Aboard the Oblivion's Pride, Admiral Krev watched with initial disdain as the primitive projectiles approached. Engage point defenses, he ordered casually. These kinetic weapons are beneath our... His dismissal died as the tactical display updated. Not a dozen missiles, as he had expected from such small vessels, but dozens upon dozens approached in complex, weaving patterns. Thraxal point defenses flared to life, vaporizing half the incoming missiles with ease. But the sheer volume overwhelmed their targeting systems. 20 missiles broke through, their warheads coated with neurosena compounds that breached the shields just long enough to deliver their devastating payload. 2 Thraxal point defense arrays simultaneously went offline as the bioweapon compromised their control systems. Jin's voice remained steady as he issued the next command. Phase 2. Valor, Aegis, Frontier, execute pincer maneuver. The 3 frigates emerged from asteroidal cover, their railguns unleashing broadsides into the now vulnerable cruisers. The electromagnetic projectiles, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, punched through the temporarily weakened defenses. Crimson flares blossomed as front hulls ruptured. 3 Thraxal cruisers exploded in succession, their elegant forms disintegrating into expanding clouds of debris. Reform the line, Krev bellowed, into comms that returned only static. All ships, reform battle formation! But his commands reached only a fraction of his fleet. The ECW drones had blinded Thraxal communications, fracturing their tactical cohesion. Ships drifted, their captains isolated, each trying to engage single targets according to doctrine, while the human vessels operated as a synchronized organism. Meanwhile, on Yareth's surface, Thraxal ground forces attempted a shock drop onto Pinnacle Station's landing decks. As their drop shuttles hovered in formation, a display of martial precision, the true ambush revealed itself. Vinespear nets, buried beneath the station's surface by Serenth resistance fighters, erupted upward. The living weapons latched onto the shuttle's engines, their caustic secretions boring through armored plating. 4 shuttles plunged into debris fields, their pilots unable to compensate for the sudden system failures. Human Marines, guided by Serenth sharpshooters, launched precision volleys of Neurosena rounds. The specialized ammunition disabled Thraxel cybernetic reinforcement nodes, creating 50-second windows where the otherwise formidable warriors were vulnerable. "Boarding parties, go!" ordered Colonel Vasquez from her command post. Marine strike teams breached the landed Thraxel vessels, overwhelming disoriented defenders in close-quarters combat. In orbit, Captain Jin surveyed the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The initial phase had exceeded expectations, but the Thraxel still outnumbered them significantly. "Full spread," he ordered. "Engage every vessel within sensor range." The Earth fleet responded as one. 50 frigate missiles, 8 corvette volleys, and a hail of polymer rounds rained on Thraxel dreadnoughts. 8 more warships were incinerated. 6 limped away under heavy fire, trailing atmosphere and debris. On the bridge of the Oblivion's Pride, Admiral Krev struggled to comprehend the disaster unfolding around him. "Impossible," he snarled. "These are primitive weapons. We should be crushing them." His tactical officer, mandibles quivering with shock, reported. "They're coordinating their attacks, Lord Admiral. Each strike is precisely timed to exploit the gaps left by our point defenses." "That is cowardice," Krev roared. "There is no honor in such tactics." "With respect, Lord Admiral," the officer replied. "They appear unconcerned with our concept of honor." On Tekran, Cora watched the holofeed with a mixture of awe and terror. The humans fought with a ferocity and coordination that seemed impossible from such a small force. Their weapons might be technologically inferior, but their tactics were devastating, exploiting every weakness in the Thraxel approach to warfare. "They fight as one organism," she whispered to Dr. Lyran, "while the Thraxel fight as individuals." Lyran's bioluminescence pulsed with hope for the first time since the invasion. "Perhaps there's something to learn from these humans after all." On Yarith's shattered plains, the human Sarenth Joint Battalion White Lotus deployed in maglev transports. 5,000 human soldiers, 2,000 Sarenth hybrids, and 1,000 Grecian field medics, a hastily assembled force, facing a Thraxel ground army of 15,000 impact-suited soldiers, marching from the fallen dome remains. Colonel Vasquez surveyed the battlefield from a forward command post. "Begin Phase 1, she ordered. Drones dropped inertial sabots that punctured Thraxel ground armor, creating dust clouds that obscured their sensors. Within seconds, guided artillery shells, GPS linked to White Lotus forward observers, slammed into clusters of Thraxel ranks. The precision barrage created chaos in the formerly orderly Thraxel advance. "Phase 2, Vasquez commanded. "Armored spear." The 10th Mechanized Striker Battalion rolled in from the southwest, their torque thrust tanks charging straight into the Thraxel advance. The tank's composite plating resisted Thraxel energy lances just long enough to breach enemy lines, creating gaps in their formation. "Phase 3, Airmobile insertion." The 3rd Aeromech Brigade's gunships swooped in from the north, unleashing rocket salvos on Thraxel artillery positions. The roar of turbine engines combined with the whine of rockets, sowing panic among Thraxel foot soldiers, unused to coordinated air-ground assault. Field Chieftain Xeris, commander of the Thraxel ground forces, watched in mounting fury as his neat battle lines disintegrated. "Stand and fight!" he bellowed through the command channel. "Face your enemies with honor!" But the humans refused to engage in the ritual single combat the Thraxel expected. Instead, they struck from multiple vectors simultaneously, never presenting a clear target for the Thraxel's superior individual weapons. "Phase 4, Vasquez ordered. "Vine Spear assault." At her signal, Sarenth botanists triggered buried biomines. Vine spears erupted in golden-green bursts, latching onto Thraxel exoskeletons and corroding internal circuits. Dozens of Thraxel warriors fell, incapacitated by the ingenious biological weapons. "Final phase," Vasquez announced. "Close quarters sweep." Human commandos, led by Vasquez herself, infiltrated Thraxel command nodes, hidden in the fallen biodome's ruins. With suppressed rail pistols, they neutralized Thraxel officers and captured encrypted data cores containing invaluable Imperium command codes. Within hours, the Thraxel force, caught in a vice of combined arms ferocity, collapsed. Field Chieftain Xeris, his exoskeleton damaged and pride shattered, was captured alive. Thousands of Thraxel warriors surrendered or fled into the oceans of Yareth, their doctrine of honorable individual combat thoroughly broken by human tactics. As reports of victory streamed in from both orbital and ground engagements, a stunned silence fell over the emergency conquered assembly. Holographic feeds replayed the vanquished Thraxel vessels in orbit and the scorched battlefield where human-led forces had achieved the impossible. Species that had long dismissed humanity as primitive now gaped at screens, showing decimated Thraxel banners floating among shattered Hulk ships. The silence stretched, broken only when High Envoy Cora stepped forward to address the chamber. Her skin glowed with renewed luminescence, though tears shimmered on her cheeks. 3 days ago, I stood before you pleading for salvation. Today, I stand to offer thanks, not just for the preservation of Sarenth lives, but for a lesson that will reshape our understanding of cooperation. She gestured to the tactical displays. The humans gave us back more than our world. They shattered the notion that peace breeds weakness. They demonstrated that innovation and coordination can overcome raw power. The chamber erupted in applause, tempered by awe and, in some quarters, unease at the implications of humanity's unexpected martial prowess. Councillor Jorik of the Grecians struggled to find words. Humanity, he finally managed. You have rewritten the military playbook of this conquered. Councillor Vega stepped forward, her expression composed despite the unprecedented victory. We did not seek dominance, she clarified. We intervened because we could not stand by in silence while a peaceful species faced extinction. Our methods saved Yareth not through superior firepower, but through cooperation and tactical innovation. We offer these lessons to all who wish to learn and to protect themselves from unknown threats. The response from other delegates was mixed. Some reacted with envy, others with fear at the implications. A few immediately requested training missions. Show us how to jam communications, how to coordinate our fleets, how to deploy combined arms on our homeworlds. Throughout the Conquered, markets surged as human arms and biotech industries, once considered niche suppliers, suddenly became hot commodities. Species that had dismissed Earth's military doctrine now sent observers to study the human tactical revolution. On Yareth, engineers and medics worked side by side, rebuilding the shattered biodomes. Biotech labs proliferated as Sarenth scientists collaborated with human counterparts to develop new defensive applications for their agricultural technology. Dr. Lyran, working closely with Colonel Vasquez, led efforts to reclaim genetic archives stolen by the Thraxel. The scent of renewal pervaded the air, mingling with the lingering smoke of battle. 3 months after the Battle of Yareth, the Concord signed the new Defense Accords, a mandate that every member species incorporate combined arms doctrine into their defense forces and share electronic countermeasure protocols. The era of individual ship-to-ship combat was ending, replaced by integrated fleet tactics pioneered by the humans. Earth offered to host an interspecies military academy on Luna Prime, with Cora named as the first dean of Sarenth Division for biotech warfare. Human Sarenth research teams began co-developing next-generation anti-hull biotech, balancing destructive potential with ethical safeguards to prevent misuse. Most significantly, a standing Conquered Vanguard was commissioned, with mixed crews from 4 founding species: humans, Sarenth, Grecian, and Aloxi. Its purpose: rapid response to existential threats against any Conquered member. In the newly reconstructed Conquered Embassy on Yareth, Cora recorded a holographic message for the first anniversary celebration. We asked for aid. They gave us thunder. But more than thunder, They gave us confidence that even the smallest voice can summon the might of stars. The Serenth will never again be only farmers. We have learned that to cultivate peace, one must sometimes be prepared for war. In her private quarters on Earth, Counselor Vega penned a journal entry that would later become famous in diplomatic circles. We sought only to help, yet in helping, we awakened a unity among worlds that had grown complacent. Now, I see that our shock and awe was less the power of our weapons and more the power of our will. Earth has found its place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as protectors. Yet even as celebration and reconstruction continued, reports reached Concord intelligence of unrest within the Thraxal Imperium. The decisive defeat had ignited internal rebellion among younger Thraxal who questioned the ancient combat doctrines. Captured Field Chieftain Xeris, now a reluctant diplomatic liaison, warned that the Imperium would adapt, perhaps abandoning honor in favor of effectiveness. The Concord's new era of cooperation and martial innovation would soon be tested again. But this time, they would face the challenge united, with humans no longer dismissed as primitive newcomers, but respected as tactical innovators who had changed the face of interstellar warfare forever. General Blake, watching training exercises at the new Luna Academy, observed to Admiral Schatz, "They called us for help. We delivered thunder. Now we must be prepared for the echo." "You think the Thraxal will return?" Schatz asked. Blake's weathered face remained impassive. "The Thraxal or someone else. The galaxy now knows Earth can fight. That makes us both a potential ally and a potential threat." "Was it worth it?" Schatz wondered. Blake watched as a mixed class of human, Serenth, and Grecian cadets practiced coordinated assault maneuvers. Ask the Serenth who still have a homeworld. Ask the Concord that now has effective defensive doctrine. Ask the next species that calls for help and finds us answering. Her eyes reflected the simulated explosions of the training exercise. "Yes, Admiral, it was worth it, and we'll do it again if necessary." In the vastness of space, beyond the borders of conquered territory, the remnants of the Thraxal fleet regrouped. Their defeat had been absolute, their doctrine shattered. As younger officers challenged the old ways, a new understanding emerged. Honor meant nothing to the dead. If they were to face humans again, they would need to evolve. But that was a conflict for another day. For now, the Serenth rebuilt, humans taught, and the Conquered strengthened its bonds. The Battle of Yareth had changed everything, not through overwhelming force, but through the thunderous arrival of unexpected allies who fought not as individuals, but as one unified storm. "They called us for help. We arrived with thunder in our wake." The words, originally spoken by General Blake, became the motto of the Concord Vanguard, a reminder that in the darkness of space, sometimes salvation comes not from the mightiest, but from those with the will to stand together against impossible odds. As Cora told her people in the days after the battle, "We are alive because humans understood something we had forgotten, that the strength of many united exceeds the power of individuals, no matter how formidable. This is the lesson we must never forget." And across the stars, the legend spread of how a small Earth task force had shattered the invincible Thraxal armada, not through superior weapons, but through superior tactics and unwavering resolve. In military academies throughout the Conquered, cadets now studied the Battle of Yareth as the textbook example of asymmetric warfare. How coordination could overcome raw power, how innovation could defeat tradition, how thunder could arise from the most unexpected sources. The Serenth commemorated the battle by planting memorial gardens, using biotech plants that glowed with the same intensity as human weapons fire. At night, the gardens shimmered like earthly lightning, a living reminder of the thunder that had saved their world. For humanity, the victory brought both prestige and responsibility. Earth's isolation had ended. They were now irrevocably entangled in galactic politics. Their ships were in demand. their tactical advisors, sought by dozens of species. The quiet mining colony they had once been was gone forever, replaced by a rising power whose defining moment had been not conquest, but salvation. As Admiral Schatz later reflected, "We didn't set out to change the galaxy. We simply answered a call for help. But in doing so, we changed ourselves, from outsiders to essential allies, from observers to shapers of galactic security, from students to teachers." And in the great hall of the Interstellar Concord, where Cora had once pleaded for aid with trembling voice, a new banner now hung alongside the others, Earth's simple globe wrapped in olive branches. Beneath it, in the script of a dozen species, were inscribed the words that had become synonymous with humanity's emergence onto the galactic stage. "They called us for help. We arrived with thunder in our wake." The story of Yareth had become more than a battle. It had become a promise that no matter the odds, no matter the enemy, those who stood for peace would never stand alone. That sometimes, the most powerful force in the universe was not a weapon or a shield, but the simple decision to help those in need. And somewhere, in the vast darkness between the stars, that promise echoed like distant thunder, a warning to those who would prey upon the peaceful, and a beacon of hope to those who feared they stood alone against the night.